Naypyidaw, Myanmar. Since his election in 2013, Pope Francis has constantly used his pulpit to champion the downtrodden and draw attention to the misery of the powerless and the persecuted. He risked the fury of Turkey by describing the mass killings of Armenians in World War I as a genocide. He apologized for the silence of church leaders in the Rwandan genocide of 1994. And 3 months ago, he denounced the persecution of our Rohingya brothers, referring to the Muslim minority that has suffered a systematic campaign of murder, rape, and arson by Myanmar's military. I would like to express my full closeness to them, he said at the Vatican at the time, and let all of us ask the Lord to save them, and to raise up men and women of goodwill to help them, who shall give them their full rights. On Tuesday, Pope Francis had a singular opportunity to be an advocate for the Rohingya as he stood next to Myanmar's de facto leader and in front of a hall full of military officials, prelates and diplomats in this ghostly fortress of a capital. But in a much anticipated speech, Francis studiously avoided using the name of Myanmar's persecuted Rohingya minority or directly addressing their situation, after church leaders advised him that doing so would only aggravate the situation and put the country's tiny Catholic population at risk. The future of Myanmar must be peace, a peace based on respect for the dignity and rights of each member of society, respect for each ethnic group and its identity, the Pope said as he stood next to Myanmar's civilian leader, Daw Aung San Suu Kyi, a Nobel Peace Prize laureate whose own reputation has suffered for failing to speak out against the killings. Francis said that respect for rule of law and the democratic order enables each individual and every group, none excluded, to offer its legitimate contribution to the common good. Rohingya is a highly polarized term in Myanmar, and the Pope's own advisors had warned him that using it during his visit could antagonize the military, embolden hardline Buddhists and even make the situation worse for the Rohingya. What the Pope said in private about their plight is not known. But critics worried that Francis' caution in public, while perhaps prudent, risked diminishing his reputation as the world's megaphone against injustice. "I'm disappointed," said Lin Kuok, a non-resident fellow at the Brookings Institution's Center for East Asia Policy Studies, who had hoped the Pope would acknowledge the Rohingya and their plight. Instead, she called his speech tepid and added, "When even the leader of the Catholic Church doesn't speak out, it really shows the desperate situation they are in." The decision whether to publicly utter the name Rohingya was perhaps the most difficult diplomatic balancing act of his pontificate, and it became a dominant narrative of the first papal visit to Myanmar. It was a visit that even his supporters considered an unforced error, as it potentially put him in a moral quandary not entirely unlike that of Pope Pius XII, whose reputation forever suffered for his calculation that speaking out against the genocide of Jews during World War II would risk the lives of Catholics. Francis is still wildly popular, and he is expected to meet with Rohingya refugees in Bangladesh later in the week.